Installing Super Perf AtticFoil is really a pretty simple process. And the number one thing I always tell people is not to overthink it. All you're really doing is laying the Super Perf AtticFoil gently on top of your existing attic insulation. And remember, radiant barrier is not a substitute for attic insulation. The radiant barrier and the attic insulation actually work together to make your home more comfortable and energy efficient. So with that being said, if your attic insulation is really low, now is the time to bring that level up before you install the radiant barrier on top. Because once you install the AtticFoil on top, you can't come back and add insulation on top of the foil later. As far as the installation process, all you really have to focus on are these three things. First of all, cover as much area as you possibly can. Radiant barrier has a cumulative effect. The more coverage, the better. So there may be some hard to reach areas in the corners, or you may miss a few spots when you lay out the foil. That's okay. Just cover as much area as you possibly can. Secondly, when you overlap the foil pieces, only overlap them 2, 3, or 4 inches. It's perforated to allow moisture vapor to pass through, and we don't want to create a vapor barrier. Third, we don't want to mash down or staple the foil into the attic insulation. We want to lay it gently on top. In fact, there's going to be little peaks and valleys in the attic insulation, and there's maybe a little airspace in there, and that's okay. We want the AtticFoil just to lay gently on top. When it comes to laying out the AtticFoil inside the attic, there's really not a right or a wrong way. Every attic is different. Some attics are wide open and they're easy to move around in, and some attics are really tight and can be a real challenge. In general, here are some tips to make the install process go better. First, decide whether you're going to run the foil parallel with the eaves or perpendicular to the eaves. Now, if you're running the foil parallel with the eaves, usually the first piece out to the edge is the hardest piece to install. And then it gets progressively easier as the slope of the roof and the attic gets bigger toward the inside. So you put the foil on the outside and then overlap it and move toward the center. If you've got a low pitch attic or it's kind of tight, you may want to run the foil perpendicular. That's running it from the center of the attic out to the edge. You'll cut a piece from the distance from the center out to the edge, lay it out, and then just go down the attic until you get to the end. Whichever way you decide to run the AtticFoil, I'd recommend making a little tool to make the job go easier. All this is a stick with a nail taped on the end. It's about 5 feet long, but you can use a stick, you can use a broom handle, you can use a PVC pipe. Some people will make a short one and then maybe a longer one depending on their attic. And what you can do with this, you can easily stab the AtticFoil and then you can push it all the way out to the eaves. It's like having a 10 or a 15-foot arm. You can also stab the foil and relocate it. That way you can overlap it that 2 or 3 inches and move it around and make it look perfect. Here are some other tools I'd recommend getting before you start the job. Altogether, they're about 20 or 30 bucks, and it's money well spent to make the job go a lot easier. The first thing is a clamp light. These are about 5 or 6 bucks. You can clamp them in the attic on the rafters. You can point them where you're working. It just makes it a lot easier to see what you're doing in the dark areas of your attic. The second thing is a half-face respirator. Now, when you're dealing with attic insulation, in particular fiberglass insulation is exactly that, glass fibers. It's nasty stuff. The last thing you want to do is be breathing it in, and I wouldn't use those cheap little dust masks. So these are about 20 bucks, and they use what's called a P100 filter. That's a particulate filter. They come in 2 versions usually, either the pancake version or the cartridge version. Personally, I like the pancake version because they're easier to breathe through, and when they get dirty or dusty, you can generally just wipe them clean. Next, foil air conditioning tape. You can get this in any hardware store, in the air conditioning department, just basic foil tape. Don't use duct tape. The duct tape will dry up over time, but you're going to use little 2 or 3 inch pieces of this to tack the foil pieces together. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. Finally, a utility knife or a box cutter, something like this. And I'd also recommend tying on either a string or a ribbon, something colorful, to the knife. Trust me, you will drop this knife at some point in the attic, and it's a lot easier to find this in the insulation when you've got that string or ribbon attached. Next, I'm going to cover some tips to make your AtticFoil installation job go a lot easier. The first thing you want to do is start as far away from your exit as possible, in the far corner of the attic, and work your way backwards toward your exit. This way you're not doubling back over any foil that you've installed, or some people will leave a path down the center of the attic and then put the foil in as they come back to their exit. The next thing is inevitably you're going to come across either some roof supports or some penetrations, maybe a vent pipe, something like that in the center of the attic that you've got to cut the foil to lay around. So just cut it, lay it down around. It doesn't have to be super tight. And this is what's called a double T-cut. Say, for example, you've got a 2x4 support coming up. You slice the top, you slice the bottom, then you do a slit down the middle. Then you fold it down, and it should lay pretty flat around that piece of wood. As I mentioned earlier, you only want to overlap the AtticFoil 2 or 3 inches at the seams. And the easy way to do this is to take a piece of the foil air conditioning tape and just create like a little L piece. And then as you slide it over, you can reach over and press it down with your finger, or that tool I mentioned earlier, you come in from the top, you can reach out 5 or 10 feet, and you can just tack it down. You do that every 4 or 5 feet, and that'll keep the foil from sliding around inside the attic. You may be lucky and have an attic that's totally wide open. If that's the case, you may want to seam 2 or 3 pieces together and create a big piece of foil, maybe 8 or 12 feet wide by 20 or 30 feet long. And the way you do this is either in your driveway or garage, roll out those pieces the length you need, overlap them a couple inches, and then take your foil tape and seam it all the way down. Then you may have a piece maybe 12 feet wide by 20 feet long, roll it up like a big rug, bring it up into the attic, and unroll it gently on top of the attic insulation. That's an easy way to cover sometimes 200 or 300 feet at one shot. That's really about it when it comes to installing the Super Perf AtticFoil radiant barrier. The main thing is just to get it done. And the over insulation method is really pretty simple. On most homes it can be done in just a few hours. If you have any questions or need technical advice or support, give us a call, send us an email, send us some pictures. We help customers every day. And I can't emphasize, we offer great customer support. That's what sets us apart from any other manufacturer or distributor. We help our customers get their job done. For anything else, visit AtticFoil.com.